Hey everybody, it's Party Elite with another episode of Total Breakdown. Continuing from yesterday, we have another battle from the King's Cup Master of Warhammer tournament, pitting the Beastmen of Scribble against the Dark Elves of John Ton. This is the second game in this set, so make sure you watch yesterday's battle first, as I will be making some references to it. Also, just want to remind you that John Ton is a YouTuber as well, and if you like what you see, make sure you check him out by following the link in the description down below. We begin, as always, with talk of composition and deployment, and it's pretty evident right away that both generals have adapted to the previous battle. So let's take a look at some of the changes here and what they might mean for the engagement up ahead. So as you can see, Malekith is still in charge of the Dark Elves, but this time he's on his chariot, so he's going to be doing a lot more hurt to infantry and not as easy to pick out up in the air with ranged units. Then we've got Dread Spears up front, spread apart, and off to the side on either flank as well, in case any cavalry might come crashing through the flanks or try to push in through the front, and cavalry, of course, includes Minotaurs and the like. Then we've got these 3 units of Harganeth Executioners, armor-piercing, and anti-infantry. They will do very well against units like the Bestigor Herd. And back here we've got 3 units of Dark Shards. These guys are also armor-piercing. Again, that'll do great against stuff like the Bestigor Herd. And, of course, they'll be providing some great range support as quickly as possible. And then back here, we've got 2 units of Cold One Knights. They're anti-large and armor-piercing. Again, able to chase into things like Minotaurs. Maybe needs to stay away from Minotaurs with great weapons. Chase after Senegors with their throwing axes, perhaps. So, a little bit of adaptation happening there as well, and if there are Cygors on the field, these guys can go chasing after them. Then we've got these Witch Elves in the center over here as well, able to dive in wherever necessary and inflict the Madness of Cain and keep some units tied down with that special ability of theirs. On the other side of the field, you can see there's a fair bit of adaptation going on here as well. The Beastmen have evolved their tactics. Malagor the Dark Omen is in charge instead this time around, and his front line consists of 4 units of Bestigor Herd. Again, heavily armored and armor-piercing, but the Dark Elves have come prepared for that. Right behind them, we've got 2 units of Minotaurs with great weapons, anti-large and armor-piercing, and that's going to be a threatening unit on the field here. Then, on either flank, you can see Chaos Warhounds with poison, ready to move out and get some charging maneuvers in as early as possible, maybe hunt after some archers if they've been left behind later on, or ultimately get rear charges when lines meet. We still have 2 units of Senegor with throwing axes, able to, again, dive in, get some early damage in, and of course, stay safe from enemy aggression, while these 2 units of Senegor with great weapons will look to dive in from multiple angles, get rear charges, and chase after enemy cavalry, perhaps, or any other units that might stick out and need taking care of. But with all that said and done, and all those changes in mind, let's see how it all breaks down. We had to pause a little bit there because, as you can see, already the aggression is starting as the Dark Elves are creeping forward, and over here the Beastmen as well pivoting around a little bit. These Chaos Warhounds being sent out to get behind the enemy army as quickly as possible. Again, you just want to get behind them. There's no reason to stay ahead if you're planning a flanking maneuver and you're hoping to shut down Dark Shards or anything of the like. You'll see, though, the Dark Elves here almost immediately moving as if they were ready for an artillery piece on the field, but right away they can turn around and sort of change their focus here, and a little bit of a mistake from the Beastmen over here. Pulling the engagement in the forest is favorable for the Dark Elves, as they are a largely infantry army, and Beastmen should have pushed out and gotten away from that situation, or pulled back and gotten away from that situation. But as they're positioned right now, the majority of the engagements are going to take place in these trees that are, of course, not ideal for large units. As that's happening, though, you can see the Dark Elves again pushing for that engagement, and over here the Senegor with their throwing axes getting involved right away, doing a little bit of damage here and there against the Harganeth Executioners, because they are a very threatening unit for the Bestigor Herd. So good call, they're focusing on those guys as they are isolated and doing a fair bit of damage. Over here, though, you'll see we get Devolve nice and early, doing a touch of damage to the Dread Spears, doing a fair bit of damage actually to the Dread Spears as they creep forward, but also hitting Malekith, and so it's a little wasted on Malekith because it's not going to do too much work there, and none of the other units were in range of that cast, so they're not being affected at all. And you'll see the Dread Spears here pushing forward, a little bit of a bait maneuver perhaps, but as the Dark Shards are firing away, they're doing a touch of damage to these Bestigor Herd, but then the Bestigor Herd respond, and take a look at how quickly the Dread Spears are falling apart as those charges meet, as those lines meet. Those Dread Spears do not stand a chance, and off to the side over here as well, we've got a wonderful charge from the Senegor with great weapons, throwing these guys back, and over here as well, the Bestigor Herd on the Dread Spears, just melting the Dread Spears away. And so you'll see the Harganeth Executioners over here pulling off to the side, drawing these Bestigor Herd in, and making sure these Dread Spears are safe from that very threatening unit. And otherwise over here as well, we've got the Harganeth Executioners pushing in against the Bestigor Herd, and Malekith as well, trying to provide some assistance. But look at that, in the center, we already have our first rout. The Dread Spears didn't stand a chance. They're already gone. So a little bit better management there would have made a huge difference. And right now we've got the Cold One Knights as well pushing forward, trying to send the Senegor with great weapons back, scare them off the field. And over here as well in the center, the Minotaurs with great weapons diving in now to the Hargoneth Executioners. And the Cold One Knights need to be very careful around those guys. They are large, but they're also anti-large, instead opting to turn around and chase after some of these Bestigor herd over here. And take a look at some wonderful maneuvering going on right here. We've got the Chaos Warhound off over here, coming in for a wonderful rear charge, positioning to get into some of these Dark Shards, and these Chaos Warhounds as well, having taken a huge sort of detour around the army, now finally coming in for some wonderful rear charges. And as that's happening, take a look at these Dread Spheres moving, matching that motion of these Chaos Warhounds. Instant response there, trying to close their avenues of entry. So great move there. Meanwhile, we have Soul Stealer going on in the center over here. Not so much to get any health, I don't think, but more so to cause some damage to these Minotaurs. Great call. The sooner you can get some damage through, the better, and these Hargoneth Executioners as well could use the help against the Bestigor herd over here. But let's take a look at these Chaos Warhounds once again. Look at this charge coming in from the rear, but the Cold One Knights are right there, so they can turn around and try and rescue these Dark Shards over here. Meanwhile, to the right over here, we do have the Senegor with their throwing axes diving into melee. A bit of a risky call here against the Dread Spears, but great job shutting down the Dark Shards and making sure they're not able to fire away. So in comes the charge, and they're going to do a fair bit of hurt, but over here is the really impressive bit. As you can see, the Chaos Warhounds have come all the way back here. They're looking for that opportunity, and they decide to push in to try and shut down the last unit of Dark Shards, but the Dread Spears are right there, and they do manage to catch most of those Chaos Warhounds. So great movement there, great maneuvering, and as you can see, Murderous Prowess kicks in at the same time. And now let's take a look at the Beastmen lines here. They are all falling apart very quickly, especially in the center. You can see the Madness of Cain is hitting a lot of extremely essential units in the middle, and there you have it. The Minotaurs, both units with their great weapons, and the Bestigor herd are now tied down in the center. So great use of the Witch Elves, pushing them into the center and just getting those three units occupied. They can't go anywhere now because they're stuck in the middle. They continue to get work done, those Witch Elves, using the Madness of Cain, trying to cause some damage. You can see these units are beginning to rout over here. The Hargoneth Executioners have done very well, though they are hurting. They are in a really rough spot here, and now the Senegor with great weapons decide to go chasing after the Dark Shards, as these Chaos Warhounds were not doing the job there. So again, very quick response there, very good call. And unfortunately, off to the side over here, we have these Hargoneth Executioners just chasing after a routing Bestigor herd unit. They should have been brought back and got involved in the central situation over here. But take a look at what the Beastmen have managed to do. They've shut down all of that range support in a matter of maybe 20 seconds, 30 seconds, just adapting to evolving situations. It's wonderful to see how those three units were shut down using very quick maneuvering. So great call there, great moves there. I have to pay my respects. Press F. Meanwhile, in the center, though, the Witch Elves getting a lot of work done still. Look at that, 4 units now rampaging. The front line of the Beastmen is not under their control. Just this one unit of Bestigor herd is all that remains under control as far as the front line goes. So the rest of the army needs to get involved somehow, but the Madness of Cain will inflict that rampage status on any unit that goes in, more or less. It's a chance to inflict, but chances are it'll happen. Meanwhile, you'll see over here we have a couple of more routes going down as the Dark Shards are falling back as well. They're taking a fair bit of damage. The Senegor with their throwing axes as well beginning to rout, and meanwhile over here the Bestigor herd are the only unit from the Beastmen coming out on top, and in the center we have some great magic coming in. Devolve is causing some damage to these Witch Elves and the Hargoneth Executioners, just hoping to remove them from the field, and at the same time we've got Soul Stealer coming in from Malekith, and again, Malekith doesn't need that extra health right now. He's only slightly been damaged, but it's more about causing damage to the enemy, and the Beastmen are in a very, very terrible spot right now. A couple of units might start rallying soon. They might dive back into the fight, but overall, everything is either routing or otherwise out of control here. We also have these Cold One Knights now rampaging in the back and chasing after the Bestigor herd, so unfortunately not able to come back into the main engagements over here, but this unit of Cold One Knights is able to dive in, but again, they have to be wary because there are those Minotaurs with great weapons, and you want those Minotaurs chasing after units like Malekith, for example, where they'll do some damage because he is on a chariot, but not so much, and he'll be able to get away relatively easily. Meanwhile, we do have the Senegor with throwing axes and the Chaos Warhounds with poison, and these great weapon Minotaurs as well diving back in, and the Witch Elves unfortunately have done their bit, only killed 17, but the tactical advantage they've provided to the Dark Elves is absolutely massive. So great use of those Witch Elves. It's nice to see that kind of use of units that otherwise are just used to kill. So just wonderful all around there. And now you'll see we've got the Cold One Knights over here rampaging instead, but they're in an ideal situation for the most part, just damaging the Centaur with throwing axes. These Minotaurs with their great weapons need to be thrown in there, and you'll see I think they dive in soon after, cause a fair bit of damage there, but at this point the Beastmen are in such a shattered state. Most of these guys are routing. The Dark Shards are now once more willing to fight as well, and take a look at this Bestigor herd here, trying to close the gap to these Dark Shards, and maybe just barely able to, but the fire continues to come in from these Dark Shards off in the side over here, just dropping those Bestigor one at a time, while in the center here both units of Cold One Knights just rampaging now, engaged against the Minotaurs with great weapons. One unit does completely fall, and now Malekith as well in a bit of a tight spot, but it's far too late for the Beastmen as the entire army has more or less given up on the fight. These guys are shattering. They do not wish to stick around and fight. Malagor as well is just in there duking it out with Malekith, but it's not going to be a good time for him. Unfortunately, he does decide to drop his flag as well, is on his way out, doesn't want to stick around, drops ultimately, and as a result of that, as all of these Dark Elves begin to rally, the Beastmen shatter. An Pyrrhic victory for the Dark Elves. Now this is a great example of both generals adapting to a previous engagement. The Dark Elves were prepared for an artillery-focused build, but didn't go so far into building a composition to fight it that they were completely flustered when the Beastmen came in with a very different build as well. Fighting in the woods was a great call for the majority infantry Dark Elf army, and the Beastmen would have done well not to take the bait. They should have pulled back or pushed off to the sides. Both generals commanded extremely well. There were some excellent maneuvers from both sides, and I really wanted to cast this battle to show that back and forth, the attempts at shutting down range, the preparation for that artillery engagement possibly. Of course, it didn't happen, but wonderful to see. Now, this isn't the last of it though. There is another battle coming out, so make sure you tune into the next battle to see how this series, this best of 3, concludes. As always, make sure you subscribe to this channel for more Total War content, and keep sending in those battle replays. It is an excellent way to highlight some great ideas from the community, and I just love showcasing great battles. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you on the battlefield.